The day my parents' will was read. It was a bright but cold morning. Sunlight came through the dark wooden windows of Keith and Associates' law office. I sat quietly in a corner, watching my brother Ethan walk confidently around the room in his expensive suit. He already acted like he owned everything, and honestly, he probably did. "Miss Rachel Thomas." The lawyer's voice broke into my thoughts. "Are you ready to begin?" I nodded and held tightly to the arms of my leather chair. I was 29 and about to find out what my parents really thought of me. Though deep down I already knew. They had compared me to Ethan my whole life, and I never seemed to measure up. Mr. Keith pushed up his glasses and started reading. "To our son, Kyle," he said, "for his hard work in the family business and keeping the Thomas name strong." Then he began listing the things Ethan would get, things that made my head spin. The family estate in Mississippi, the summer home in the Nag's Head, control of Thomas Industries, and an investment portfolio worth millions. With each item, Ethan's grin grew wider. Then it was my turn. "To our daughter, Rachel," Mr. Keith said, pausing and flipping through the papers, "we leave the painting Autumn Twilight, which hangs in the study of our main home." The room went silent. Ethan didn't even try to hide his laugh. "A painting?" I asked, barely able to speak. "Just a painting?" "It was your mother's favorite," Mr. Keith said quietly, looking uncomfortable. Ethan walked over and put a hand on my shoulder, gripping just a little too hard. "Don't worry, sis. I'll find you a job in the company, maybe in the mailroom." I pulled away from him and stood up. The Thomas family fortune, built over 3 generations, now belonged to Ethan. All I got was a painting. It was one my mother had bought years ago from a small gallery. I'd always thought it was beautiful, trees at sunset with odd shapes hidden in the background. But still that didn't seem fair. "Is that really all?" I asked Mr. Keith if that was really all. He nodded, looking sorry. "You need to pick up the painting within 5 days," he said. I didn't say anything else. I walked out, ignoring Kyle calling my name behind me. The drive to my parents' house, now Kyle's house, felt strange, like a dream. The guards at the gate looked at me with suspicion, but let me in after I explained I was there for the painting. Inside, the housekeeper, Ruth, met me at the door with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Miss Rachel," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "What they did to you wasn't right." I hugged her back, trying not to cry. Ruth had been more like a mother to me than my real one at times. She helped me take the painting off the wall in the study. We wrapped it carefully in a blanket. "Your mother used to stare at this painting for hours," Ruth said softly, "especially in her last few months. Sometimes she'd say strange things about numbers and patterns. We thought the illness was making her confused." I looked closer at the painting in the dim light. The shapes in it seemed to move, forming patterns I had never noticed before. "Numbers?" I asked. Ruth nodded. She gently traced the shapes with her fingers. "Mr. Thomas used to get so angry when she did that," she said. That night, back in my small apartment across town, I hung the painting on the living room wall. It was beautiful in its own way. The forest scene was painted with great care. Every leaf and branch was perfect. But the geometric shapes didn't quite match the natural parts. It was like they were placed there on purpose, as if trying to send a message. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, staring at the painting. It was the last thing my mother had given me. Was it a cruel joke? A final reminder that I would never be good enough for them? Or was there something more? My phone buzzed, Kyle again. I ignored it like the 15 calls before. He probably wanted to brag again. Or maybe offer me that mailroom job. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching for the painting, Autumn Twilight by an artist named Liam Lawson. There wasn't much. No big shows, no auction records, almost nothing online. The gallery where my mother had bought it had closed years ago. It was like the painting didn't exist before she found it. Then a text from Kyle popped up. "Don't be bitter, sis. Come work for me." It's what Mom and Dad would have wanted. I sighed. What they had wanted was for me to be more like Kyle, to care about profits and business deals. But that was never who I was. I cared about art, history, and bringing old things back to life. I had disappointed my parents by choosing my own path, and now I knew for sure how they felt. But something about the painting kept pulling me in. Those strange shapes, there was something familiar about them. I remembered learning about steganography in my art restoration classes. It's a way to hide messages in plain sight. I got up and looked at the painting more closely. The shapes were slightly different in color than the rest of the forest scene. It was hard to tell unless you were really looking, and they seemed to form a pattern. Suddenly, a knock at the door made me jump. It was past midnight. Who would come by this late? I looked through the peephole. It was Kyle. His usually perfect hair was messy. "Rachel," he called. "Open up. We need to talk about the painting." I stayed quiet and kept watching him. He had never cared about art before. Why was he here now, asking about a painting he once laughed at? "Rachel, please," he said, his voice shaking. "Mom left instructions about the painting. You need to give it back." Instructions? My heart started pounding. Maybe I wasn't imagining things. Maybe there really was something hidden in the painting. "Go away, Kyle," I said through the door. "The painting is mine. It's all I got, remember?" "You don't understand," he said sharply. "That painting isn't what you think. Give it to me now, and I'll give you $8 million. $8 million? For the same painting he had mocked just hours ago? I stepped back from the door, my thoughts racing. Kyle was a lot of things, but he wasn't careless with money. If he was offering that much, the painting had to be worth far more. Then I heard him fumbling with something, keys. Did he still have a spare key from when I was sick last year? I grabbed the painting off the wall and ran to my bedroom. I locked the door just as I heard the front door open. "Rachel," Kyle shouted. "Where are you? Where's the painting?" I clutched the painting tightly. My hands were shaking. In the dim light, the shapes on the painting seemed to glow slightly. And then I saw it, something I hadn't noticed before. The shapes weren't random. They were numbers. Hidden so well, you'd never see them unless you knew what to look for. "Rachel," Kyle called again, closer now. "Think about what you're doing. That painting is worth more than you can imagine." I turned the painting over and looked at the back. The canvas was mounted professionally, but the frame felt off. There was a small gap that didn't belong. The bedroom door handle rattled. "Rachel, open this door right now." With shaking fingers, I pried at the gap in the frame. A small piece of paper fell out. It was covered in my mother's neat handwriting. I read the first line of the letter, and my breath caught in my throat. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then you found what I always knew you would. You see patterns others don't. You question what others accept. And now, my sweet girl, you're about to learn why your father and brother were always afraid of you." The pounding on my bedroom door grew louder, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on my mother's letter, my hands shaking as I read. Every word revealed a truth that changed everything. The shapes in the painting weren't just patterns. They were coordinates, account numbers, and passwords. And they led to something that could destroy Thomas Industries. My brother, still yelling outside my door, had no idea that his perfect world was about to fall apart. I didn't know how long I sat there on the floor, reading the letter again and again, my hands trembling. The numbers in the painting my mother wrote, combined with the codes I've included, will show you the truth about Thomas Industries. Your father and brother built their empire by stealing. They took inventions and designs from brilliant people who trusted them. I was one of those people, Rachel. And you, my daughter, were always meant to carry on my work. A loud crash from the living room pulled me out of my thoughts. Kyle had apparently given up on waiting. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, already dialing 911. "Go ahead," he yelled back. "I'll tell them you stole company property. That painting belongs to Thomas Industries." But now I knew the truth. The letter explained it all, how my mother had been a brilliant inventor, how she had hidden her work in plain sight for years. The painting wasn't just art. It was a map, a guide to a secret database filled with evidence. "The coordinates will take you to my private lab," the letter continued. "Everything you need is there. But be careful, Rachel. Your father and brother will do anything to keep their secrets buried." I heard Kyle's footsteps fade, then the front door slammed shut. He was gone for now. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my room. My apartment was a mess. Cal had clearly searched everywhere trying to find the painting.
But I didn't care about the mess.
I had work to do. First, I took photos of every part of the painting, capturing each shape and angle. Then I carefully wrote down the coordinates from my mother's letter. She said I needed to place the shapes in a certain order to reveal the full access codes. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Ruth, our old housekeeper. "Miss Rachel, men are at the house taking all your mother's things. They're searching the study. Please be careful." They were trying to destroy evidence. I had to act fast. The coordinates led to a spot in Connecticut, about 5 hours from the city. My mother had written that she bought the property under her maiden name, keeping it a secret from my father and brother. "The lab is underground," her letter said. "It looks like an old storm cellar, but it has high-tech security. Use the first number sequence from the painting to get in." I packed quickly, my laptop, the painting wrapped in blankets, some clothes, and the letter. As I walked to my car, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street with its engine running. Cal wasn't done yet. The drive to Connecticut was stressful. The SUV followed me for about an hour, staying just far enough back. I took every side road and shortcut I could think of. I finally lost them near the Texas border. By the time I reached the location, it was almost sunrise. At first, the place looked deserted, just an old, broken-down farmhouse in a field of overgrown weeds. But when I walked around, comparing the shapes from the painting to the land, I saw what my mother had done. The shapes weren't just numbers, they were a map. The trees, rocks, and even the layout of the ground matched the painting perfectly. The storm cellar was exactly where the artwork showed. Its rusty doors looked like they hadn't been used in years. But when I entered the first code into a hidden keypad, the doors opened smoothly, revealing stairs going down into the dark. Motion sensor lights turned on as I stepped inside. The air got cooler with each step, and I could hear a low humming sound from the ventilation system. At the bottom, there was another keypad. This time, I used the second number sequence from the painting. What I saw next took my breath away. The lab was spotless and modern. White walls, advanced machines, and rows of softly humming computers. But what really stood out was one wall covered with patents and prototypes. I recognized many of them from Thomas Industries products, but with one major difference. Each one had my mother's name signed on it. "Oh my God," I whispered, walking closer. These weren't just similar to Thomas Industries inventions. These were the originals. My mother hadn't just been involved. She was the true inventor behind everything. The genius behind the company. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me that made my blood run cold. "Impressive, isn't it?" I turned around and saw my father standing in the doorway. He looked exactly the same as he did the day he died. Or, at least the day we thought he died. Kyle stood beside him, smiling like he'd already won. "Did you really think your mother was the only one who knew about this place?" my father asked as he walked into the lab. "I'll admit, hiding the coordinates in that painting was clever. We've been searching for this lab for months." I stepped back, holding my mother's letter tightly. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Sometimes, the best way to make people stop looking is to pretend you're gone. Your mother's death was real. Mine, let's just say it served its purpose." Then it hit me, the will reading was a setup. "You wanted me to find the painting," I said. "We needed you to lead us here," Kyle said, stepping in front of the exit. "Mom changed all the lab's security before she died. We couldn't get in without the codes." My father moved closer. "Now that you've unlocked the lab, you're going to help us erase everything. Every file, every invention. Your mother's work will disappear, and Thomas Industries will stay safe." But they had made a big mistake. While they were talking, I had slowly moved toward my mother's main computer. In her letter, she had mentioned something called the Clarity Protocol, a special code that would activate her emergency plan. "Actually," I said, reaching behind me to type the sequence, "I don't think I will." Suddenly, the lab's lights turned red. A computer voice spoke. "Clarity Protocol activated. Broadcasting evidence to all major news outlets and regulatory agencies. Deletion impossible." My father's face twisted with anger. "What have you done?" Mom called it her insurance policy, I said, standing taller. All of her work, all the proof of stolen inventions, fake documents, and patent fraud has just been sent to hundreds of secure places. Thomas Industries is about to have some serious explaining to do. Kyle rushed toward me, but it was too late. Loud alarms rang out. Steel doors slammed shut, locking us all inside. The lab had sealed itself. We're locked in, I said, watching both their faces grow pale. She knew you'd try to erase her, just like you erased her inventions. So she made sure the truth would come out, no matter what. Through the small windows in the lab, I saw flashing police lights getting closer. The security system must have alerted the local authorities. My father and Kyle looked at each other in panic as the sirens grew louder. The painting, wrapped in blankets near the door, still sat quietly. It had looked like a simple piece of art, just shapes and colors. But those strange shapes had brought me exactly where I needed to be. My mother's final gift wasn't just a painting. It was justice. I watched as my father and brother finally realized their perfect world was falling apart. I smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. The real story of Thomas Industries was finally going to be told, and this time, no one could hide the truth. The next 4 days were a blur: police questions, news reports, and chaos inside the company. From my hotel room, I watched it all unfold. Thomas Industries stock crashed. Years of lies and cover-ups were falling apart in front of the whole world. Thomas CEO found alive, arrested for fraud. Company built on stolen ideas. The hidden genius behind Thomas Tech. The headlines were everywhere. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, and former employees all wanted to talk to me. But I was only waiting for one call: Ruth, our old housekeeper. When she finally called, her voice shook with emotion. "Your mother knew this day would come," she said. "That's why she made me promise to give you this after the truth came out." An hour later, I sat in Ruth's small living room, holding another letter from my mother. This one wasn't about codes or instructions. It was her story. "My dearest Rachel," it began. "Now that you know the truth about Thomas Industries, it's time to learn the truth about yourself." As I read, everything started to make sense. "You were never less than your brother," she wrote. "You were always meant for something greater." My mother hadn't just been another victim of my father's lies. She had been planning for this moment for years, quietly preparing me. Those art history classes I took, the ones my father said were a waste of time, they taught me how to see patterns and hidden messages. My work in restoration had trained me to be careful, focused, and to rebuild the truth from broken pieces. "Every time your father pushed you away from the company," she wrote, "every time he gave Kyle more attention, he was helping you without knowing it. He was making you stronger." While Kyle learned how to protect lies, I had learned how to find the truth. Just then, a knock at Ruth's door interrupted me. A woman in a sharp suit stood outside, holding a briefcase. "Miss Thomas," she said. "I'm Austin Stoll from the SEC," the man said. "We need to talk about your mother's patents." The next few hours felt like a crash course in just how well my mother had prepared. She hadn't just saved proof of the stolen patents. She had kept inventing, working secretly in her underground lab. The coordinates from the painting didn't just lead to past evidence. They led to new inventions that could change the entire industry. "Your mother filed these patents under a trust," Austin explained as he spread papers across Ruth's coffee table. "A trust that names you as the only person who can claim them." My hands shook as I looked at the documents. Dozens of patents, all legally protected, and now all belonging to me. These weren't just the ideas my father had stolen in the past. They were new technologies, years ahead of anything on the market. "Thomas Industries doesn't just owe you payment for what was stolen," Austin said. "They've built their entire company around your mother's work. They can't function without it." "So, what does that mean?" I asked, though I was already starting to understand. "It means, Miss Thomas," he said, "you now have control over the company that once pushed you aside." The next morning, while my father and Kyle sat in jail waiting for their trial, I walked into the headquarters of Thomas Industries, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the new owner. The board of directors, desperate to keep the company from falling apart, had no choice but to agree to my terms. Standing in my father's old office, I found something else, a hidden wall safe behind a painting. The combination? The final sequence of numbers from my mother's painting. Inside the safe was a personal diary. It listed every invention my father had stolen and every person he had taken credit from. But even more important, it listed names. People like my mother, who had been robbed of their ideas and recognition. A month later, I stood on a stage at a press conference. The room was full of reporters and cameras. Thomas Industries was built on stolen dreams, I said. But starting today, we begin making things right. I announced the launch of a foundation to repay every inventor hurt by the company's past. But I wasn't stopping there. We're turning Thomas Industries into what it should have always been, a place where brilliant ideas are supported, not stolen. A home for real innovation. The painting that had started it all now hangs in my new office. It's a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. The geometric shapes that once held my mother's secrets now stand for something new, the design of a better future, one built on truth instead of lies. Kyle still writes to me from prison, switching between threats and begging for help. I sent Kyle just one photo, the painting, now hanging in the same spot where our father's portrait used to be. He would understand the message. The lies were over. My father stayed silent, but it didn't matter anymore. The truth he had tried so hard to hide was now the only thing people remembered. Jeremy Thomas wasn't seen as a brilliant businessman anymore. He was remembered as the man who stole his own wife's work. One evening, as I was about to leave the office, Ruth handed me one last letter from my mother. It had been set to arrive exactly 1 month after the company's new beginning. "My dear Rachel," it began, "if you're reading this, you've done more than uncover the truth. You've started to rebuild something better from the ruins of the past. I never wanted you to inherit a broken company. I wanted you to have the chance to build something honest, something that reflects your heart." I traced her handwriting with my fingers, feeling closer to her than ever. What once seemed like a worthless painting had turned out to be the key to everything. But more than that, it was her way of showing me I had inherited something more important than money or power. I had inherited her vision, her dream for a better world. Now, 3 years later, Thomas Industries has become something entirely new. We renamed it Aurora Innovations, and it's nothing like it used to be. We're not just leaders in technology anymore, we're known for doing business the right way. The foundation we started has helped many inventors take back credit for their stolen work. And our incubator program has launched many new careers. We host events to support young talent, and the company's focus is on fairness, creativity, and growth. The painting still hangs in my office. Its geometric shapes are now something I find comforting. Sometimes late at night, I almost think they move slightly as if my mother is still with me, sending new messages, new mysteries to solve. But the biggest message was always there, hidden in plain sight, just like those shapes. Success built on lies will always fall apart. But success built on truth and justice will last. Last week, Kyle was released from prison. He sent me a message asking to meet and talk about rebuilding our family. I haven't answered. Some patterns I've learned are better left alone. Instead, I focus on the future. Each year, our company holds an innovation fair. Young inventors come to share their ideas without fear of them being stolen. Last year's winner was a young woman who reminded me so much of my mother, smart, underestimated, but full of vision. As I handed her the award, I saw my mother's painting reflected in the glass trophy. The shapes in the painting seemed to move, almost like they were celebrating with me. In that moment, I understood something important. The most valuable gifts aren't always things we can touch or hold. Sometimes they're the ones that change who we are inside. That painting, which once seemed worthless, had given me something priceless. The truth about my past, the power to shape my future, and most of all, the chance to make sure no other brilliant mind would ever be ignored or taken advantage of again. And I know that would make my mother prouder than any amount of money ever could.